Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Tom Wells here. Today is Friday, February the 2nd, 2018. 8 a.m. Eastern Time, our first daily dose of happy for the day. Happy Friday, everybody. We got through the week, and like you said, Tom, in the email you sent to me last night, this has been a quick week. I mean, it just kind of flew by. I don't know why, but it did.
I don't know why either. I just said that, but I think they all do in a certain way.
Yeah, right.
But for some reason, it just all of a sudden seemed like I was back sending you the next email about the next show, and we had just finished it. I don't know.
That's right.
Sometimes time does seem to go quicker.
It's crazy sometimes. It really is. But well, I hope you've had a good week, a productive week. Any great wins going on this week?
Yeah, I've had a couple. I'm in a class to learn how to channel, and I've had some some wins with seeing that how easy it is in a way to let source speak through me when I just do this automatic writing, ask a question, and then just let my pen go on the paper. And I'm learning that there's a thing about expecting so much from what I channel to be so magnificently meaningful, but in another way, it just comes, it just flows. And there's a unique way that I speak my truth in the world, you might say. And when I get to that place where I see it just flowing, it's just very simple and sweet and nice, helpful information that comes through. And it's funny sometimes, and it's just easy to take it in. That's different than when I'm trying hard, to get into something. And that's kind of what our talk is about today, because that's the difference between being in the vortex and not being in the vortex right there.
Absolutely. In fact, before the show started, you were telling me how, in my words, we should probably start calling you Tom Robert Frost Wells, because you actually wrote a poem channeled, and I thought, wow, I don't know how many people have written a poem while channeling. That's pretty darn good.
Well, what was so funny, that was a real law of attraction story there, because I was trying to channel, and I was feeling like, well, I'm not being successful. So what I was writing, I was definitely had gone into meditation and then come out of that with a strong intention that whatever came through me, I was going to let it just come, and it was going to be coming from my source self. It was going to be coming from my higher infinite intelligence self,
Mm-hmm.
And I started writing, and I didn't like what I was writing. It seemed like I was stuck. It seemed like I was complaining that this is hard, and I was, tying it to the fact of loneliness and all these different things. And as I went to write it in an email to my coach, who's I'm working with on all this, the computer kept capitalizing words where it shouldn't capitalize. I was doing it with a dictation program.
Okay.
Where you're talking to the microphone.
Right.
And how come it's putting a cap there? And I was getting more ornery, and then I started realizing it's putting a capital every place it would if this was a poem. It's putting it in perfectly where a poem would want to have the next segment of this sentence capitalized. So since I write poetry sometimes, I saw that and I said, okay, maybe that's what life is telling me, what source is telling me. This is a poem. And even though I don't like that much what I've written here, it is a poem, because I was telling a story of this guy who comes to the edge of this woods and he's on a horse and all this stuff. And so I put it all in a poem form, and it turned out to be a 7-stanza long poem.
Oh, wow.
That my coach said was like reading literature to her. She said, yes, it was full of drama, and yeah, it had angst in it, but to some degree, but it was beautiful. She said it was really a beautiful poem. So I thought, well, okay, maybe that's one thing that I'm going to be doing through my channeling. I'm going to be writing more poetry, because all the poetry I've written so far in my life has come in a channeled way. Like I'll get up and it'll be 8 a.m. and something will tell me to just go start writing some poetry, and I will, and I won't even think at all about what I'm writing. I'll just write. And I'll get like an 8-line poem or a 6-line poem, usually not really long things, but this was 7 stanzas.
Well,
and so, it told a whole story.
It's pretty cool.
And the computer was telling me to do it this way. So I thought, well, that's pretty good channeling.
I would say so. And for those who are interested, Tom's new book, Channeled Poetry, will be available in the lobby at the conclusion of the programs.
Yeah, okay. All right. I'll write a book.
There you go. Why not? You could do it. I'm sure you could.
Oh, well, maybe I will. Actually, who knows?
Well, actually, you are. We're all writing a book now, when you think about it, because
That's right.
We're writing this book on, your daily dose of happy that a lot of submissions have come in on, and I can't even say, Tom, I've had time to read through all of them, although I will be doing that in the next couple of weeks because this is where the big editing process happens. But it's going to be a really, really fun book, and we hadn't mentioned it in a while on the podcast, so I figured we should mention it here because, among other things, listeners of this podcast, if they're listening carefully and they listen every day, they're going to find out a way that they can get the book for free as a free ebook. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. So let's get to the Vortex, because that Vortex, when I first heard that word, and I heard it through an Abraham, a little segment on YouTube, and I said, what the heck is a vortex? I mean, I was envisioning like some sort of tornado flying through Oklahoma or something. But why would you want to be in the vortex? If there's a tornado going on, I want to be as far away from that as possible. So what's going on here? That was my original thought when I first heard about this. So why don't you introduce what the vortex is?
Oh, my gosh, yeah. I wanted to read a little bit about what Abraham says about it because it's fascinating. This particular quote, I thought, a vortex is a vibrational state of being. It's the precursor of all positive motion forward, of all that is. It's like encapsulated, condensed, straight-up source. It's pure positive energy. It's the holding tank. It's the anchor. It's the touchstone. It's the place where all dreams and wishes and hopes are held until we find vibrational alignment with them. It's the eternal pool of well-being to which each of us have added mightily along the path of our physical experience. So it's a reality, even though you can't see it, you can feel it. Just the way, how your dog might hear things or might smell things that you can't. Well, there's this vibrational reality that's there that you can't see it and you can't hear it, but when you get in the vicinity of it, you can feel, and what you feel is the magnetic pull of it. You feel the deliciousness of it, and when you're far away from it, you feel the discord of not being close to it. And so, if when you're ornery, you're vibrationally speaking not near your vortex, but when you're hopeful, you're right on the brink of it. And so, in fact, the door to it, what they call, we're speaking of the vortex is Abraham's fairy tale vortex. So there's something about it that's like fairy tale like, but in reality, it's a real thing, they say, and the entry point is somewhere between hope and belief. So it's this repository. I sometimes speak to clients of it. It's like a reservoir, a repository where everything, even in past lives, and if you believe in past lives, but definitely everything in this life that you've ever wished for, hoped for, longed for, imagine that you want in any way whatsoever, simply just by knowing what you don't want, you put into your vortex the things that you do want, then they are immediately created there. That's the place where the second you ask for anything, whether directly or indirectly, it's created in this place called this vortex, and then it's just waiting for you to get in the vibrational vicinity of it, and it will literally pull you in. If you're even hopeful about what you want, it'll pull you in and allow these things to manifest in your life. So the only thing that stops that from happening is our vibrational resistance to the fact that this vibrational place exists and that it's taking care of everything for us. So that's a little bit of what it is. Okay. There's a lot more that they say about it.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Well, actually, when you were talking about straight-up source and so forth, I was getting kind of high at that point. So I was glad you skipped past that part.
Yeah, well, it's like 100% proof.
100% proof. But the other thing that struck me is, I mean, if that's got everything in it that I've ever asked for, I presume it includes stuff that I asked for unconsciously or subconsciously. I wasn't doing it deliberately. I was just, doing normal daily thoughts and stuff was going in there. I mean, that place must be pretty full. There's got to be a lot of stuff in there for all the thoughts that we have all the time, right?
You would think. I mean, the level of abundance in that place must just be so rich. And they were saying, can you imagine a society where billions of people are constantly asking, and Source is holding for each of them the equivalent of what they're asking for. And these billions of people have been working for alignment with who they are. So when they ask, they don't doubt that they're going to get what they're asking for. They don't worry. They don't feel any competition from other people. They don't squabble over resources with other people. They don't make others right. They just ask and they receive. And they said, that's actually the way all of humanity really is. And so, anyway, I was thinking, we got a long way to go.
Yeah, right.
But that's the way it already is. I mean, and they said, when you decided to come here before you were in this body, that was the promise to you. In a way, that was what you knew. You were coming to an environment where you would simply ask for something, it would immediately be created. And as long as you were not in resistance to it, as long as you were not vibrating with something contrary to it, you would be able to experience it in reality. It wouldn't be a fantasy fairy tale imagination of it. It would actually come into reality.
Well, I guess then I'm really glad that it's an abundant space, so to speak, in the vortex, because and I'm glad it's not like an Oklahoma tornado vortex, because if it was one of those, you'd have these houses and cruise ship liners flying by at 250 miles an hour. We don't want that.
Yeah, they said they used the word vortex so that we could understand the magnetic attraction of it, that it isn't something that we have to earn. It's something that wants to pull us into it, and all we have to do is get in the realm of hope or belief, and it'll pull us in. But we spend a lot of time justifying the fact that we can't have what we want for this reason or that reason or this reason or that reason or this reason or that reason. So, we say complain about the fact, and we try to validate why we're right. I mean, I can't tell you how many conversations where I've explained to somebody why I can't yet have the full amount of money that I want, or why that this lover that I want really isn't in my life yet. But she will be, but she's not here yet. And it's so hard for me to accept the fact that the only reason I'm not with the lover I want to be, or I don't have the extra $1 million right now in my bank account, is because of my own resistance to it.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
I'm going, really? I'm resistant to it? How am I resistant?
Well, that was one of the other things that came up. They talked about the vortex, and then they talked about resistance. And that was the standard question I always asked myself. I'd look at my chest and I'd say, where is the off switch? Because I didn't know that I had any resistance going on. If you're not aware of it at first, that could be a little, disconcerting.
Yeah, and that's why we have an emotional guidance system.
Yes.
That they said that the entire reason for our emotional guidance system from morning till night is to tell us our proximity to our vortex. Right. So in other words, it's source, it's pure, unadulterated source, like they say, and that's where we want to be. That's who we really are. I mean, when I try to do channeling, it's simply, can I relax enough to let myself be in this hope and belief that this eternal, infinite intelligence is going to speak through me. The thing that I really am is going to manifest in my words. Or am I in a place where I doubt the fact that if I open my mouth or I get out my pen and paper, that I'm not going to be able to get direct advice, direct input from my higher infinite self. So,
yeah.
I don't know why I said all that, but.
No, it's true though what you're saying, and the fact that the emotional guidance system exists is the first thing that
what I was saying.
It's the first thing that makes it feel more comfortable to me, and it did make it feel more comfortable to me. And then later on, when I learned that the emotional guidance system was a reflection of what goes on between your physical self or my physical self and my inner being. And that, in fact, when I am in alignment between my physical being and my inner being, that's when I'm in the positive end of the spectrum, so to speak. And when my physical being is feeling negative while my inner being is feeling positive, that's when I feel the negative side of it. That's the negative emotion part. When they explained that to me, that was actually the first time I ever really heard a useful and cohesive explanation of what emotions were. Because up until then, I thought it was just stuff that happened to you. You know, emotions just happened to you. And they didn't really have any meaning or any purpose.
That's a whole show, right? That's a whole podcast right there.
Yeah, really. Yeah, it is.
You know, because the concepts we have about emotions have literally caused the entire field of psychology to be what it is in a way.
Oh, yeah.
And yet I'm not saying there's not a need for psychology or that there isn't some interesting, you know, avenues to explore about what emotions really are. But I kind of really like the simplicity with which it's described by Abraham and other channeled entities that say, you know, they're just simply vibrational indicators of whether or not you're aligning with your higher self, you know. And that's a simple way to think of emotions.
It is.
I like it.
I do too. And the other thing that really catches my attention for a lot of different reasons is that they teach that your inner being is always looking at the positive. It always looks on the bright side of life, to borrow from Monty Python, right? It's just, it always looks at it positively, which is, again, not what we're normally taught, particularly by our various religions on this planet. The religions teach generally just the opposite, that it's, you know, that you have to be concerned because, you know, you have to behave just right or you're going to get punished and all this other stuff. And knowing that we're actually being loved and just being adored at all times, no matter what we're doing, unconditional, pure love, that's a really reassuring message for me.
Yeah. And I think this thing of the vortex is just, to me, almost like a staggering message, because if it's true that everything I've ever wanted, even in past lifetimes, but definitely everything I've wanted in this life is in my vortex, and that the key to getting in there is just simply hoping and believing and allowing myself to let it happen, then I realized, well, the only thing standing between me and having everything I want in my life is this old built-in resistance, which basically is the patterns that I picked up. Again, we've said this in every podcast. It's the patterns we picked up as kids and throughout our life that have told us that life is a struggle. And life is difficult and things don't come easy and there is no free lunch. I mean, I can't believe how many times I'm back faced with the fact that it's just that I'm riding in this place of resistance inside myself. I sort of am so familiar with that I can't imagine that I could have what I want in my life that easily, that it's just simply there waiting for me. It's like, I love the one way they describe the vortex. They say it's the place where all cooperative components have assembled themselves to allow the thing that you want to be there, to exist. And you just have to become a cooperative component with the rest of those cooperative components. Yeah. And, wow. So I just got to really relax a lot. You know, I've got to let myself really chill out so that these things can flow to me.
Right. Because the flip side, of course, is that that same imagination is actually the best tool to use to help us get into that vortex, to basically imagine a reality different from the one that we've been experiencing because we got ourselves into this bad place. Well, imagining what the good reality is like, and you know how you want it to play out for yourself, and you know what the best possible result is, and then turning that into a story. Wendy and I were talking about that yesterday afternoon in yesterday's second podcast. That the ability to tell a cohesive story that is full of adjectives and details and moves along and so forth is probably, you know, kind of like what a kid does when a kid's imagining and playing with, you know, friends and so forth. It's really the best activity we can engage in, because that's how we draw what's in the vortex to ourselves. We imagine, even though we're making it up, even though it's fiction when we're first writing it, that's how we get there. And it's really a wild concept when you think about it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I have this coach I've been working with over the last year, and she's really good. And the thing about her that I like is that you can't have any conversation with her where she won't point out, gently or otherwise, that where I'm talking about my life in a way that is self-sabotaging. You know, and I realize this thing that Abraham was saying when I was reading about the vortex, how you can have this investment so much in being right, in wanting to validate the fact that my opinion about myself not having what I want is something I have to defend, or something that I'm so convinced that in certain areas of my life I'm stuck that I literally argue for it in a certain way. It's sort of like I'm saying to myself, well, I don't want to be arguing for the fact that it's difficult, but look, I've just spent 8 years trying to have this thing and I still don't have it, and therefore how can I convince myself it's not difficult if that's been the case? And the thing that I have to just keep realizing is that that doesn't negate the fact that the present moment is all I have going forward, and the only way I'll get into my vortex is I've got to quit talking about the fact of I've spent 8 years spinning my wheels in a certain area of my life, or feeling resistance in that area of my life. And sometimes, like, what I like about her is she'll often, teach that go back and look at all the milestones of success you've had in that area of your life. You can even, like, she was doing this thing for 2017, going back and say, what are the milestones of success that you had in 2017 in different areas of your life? And I was resistant to even getting out a piece of paper and writing down all the successes I had in 2017.
Isn't that amazing?
I kind of went through them in my mind.
It's crazy how much we'll resist. I was just saying, isn't it amazing? Because you're right. I've had the exact same experience where, I try to deliberately focus on what's going well and so forth. And that's where you first notice, in my case anyway, that's where I first began to notice, wow, there really is some resistance in me. Resistance that I didn't even know was there. And it evokes itself, it shows itself just when I try to focus positively. Like, whoa, where on earth did that come from? Mm-hmm. But it's there, and we've all experienced it. And the good thing is when we focus on actually doing it and just stick to it and try it and, stumble through it and not do it right the first time, but you do it right the second time and all that kind of thing. When you just keep going with it, it actually does become easier. And the resistance flows away.
Yeah, I say often, and I've seen often, that there's something in our society, I believe, and certainly in my family that I grew up in, that just didn't communicate. I didn't get the message from enough people and enough sources like movies and television and the news and my teachers and my parents and stuff, that life is actually designed to be a joyful event. Largely that's the main reason that we're here. It's entirely about getting what you want and enjoying what you want, and abundance and flow and ease and joy and peace. That there's something out in our society, that strongly says it's really not that way. It's really quite a difficult journey here. This is a tough place to be on the earth, it's
happiness
a school,
is fleeting,
it's a place where you got to prove your worth.
Yeah.
Pardon?
Happiness is fleeting, and you got to put your nose to the grindstone, and sometimes you have to struggle your way through life, but that's, what the mark of a good breadwinner is and all this other stuff. Yeah, it's the same message over and over again. And it's a challenge to overcome it. But it's a good thing because we can overcome it. That's the part that makes me feel good, knowing that despite all that training, despite all that misguided teaching, shall we call it, that society has given us, we can still overcome it just by deciding to start doing positive stuff. Just by focusing on positive, telling the positive stories, doing the little exercises, doing the meditations, doing the affirmations, doing the readings, listening to the positive music, appreciating the nature, all that stuff, we can actually change the programming. That's great news.
Yeah, and we are changing the programming, and it's and a huge amount of the journey is just believing that life is designed to work in this amazing way. It's really talking about a revolution on the face of the earth. If billions of people woke up to the fact that life is that abundant and it wants to give us what we want that easily, that's a paradigm shift on the whole face of the earth, in my opinion.
And it's happening. I think we're already seeing the signs of it. Yeah. It's not happening
and
as a huge wave yet, but it's getting there. It's not happening as a huge wave yet, but it's getting there. It's building. You can see it building.
And it might be happening more than we think. I mean, they talk about how each generation comes in on the shoulders of the previous one, and even the stuff they were talking about, the Vortex, they said that the work that the previous generation is doing, the things that, say, for example, that our generation has struggled with, are the things that let the next generation not have to struggle with the same thing.
Good point.
And so they said, we want you just to understand. They said this 3 different places I was reading about the Vortex. They said the same thing. They said, we want you to understand you don't have to die and come back in a new generation in order to get the things you want. We want you to understand that those things can still come to you even though you've struggled.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's good news for people in my generation, that, yes, I've struggled to have the lover I want, to have the money I want, to have to have peace in our society or whatever you're struggling for. It's like that those things can manifest. They definitely can manifest because they're already created in the vortex.
Right.
So can we relax enough to let them show up?
And I think we can. I really do. I think we can learn it individually, and I think that's what the building wave is all about. More and more people are learning it individually, and as that pattern continues, the wave just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So it may not be huge yet, but it's certainly on the way. It's building. It's building quickly, and that I don't know how fast it's going to happen, but I certainly expect to see some pretty significant shifts in the remainder of my life, and I'm not sure how long that'll be, but I think it's going to be pretty dramatic. That much I'll tell you for sure.
I was talking to a young man who's a yoga instructor. He was probably in his 20s or early 30s, and he was asking me. Somehow I said something about we're talking about what we do, and he said, "So what do you do?" And I said, "I'm a life coach." And he said, "Well, what kind of life coach?" And I said, "I work with law of attraction." And he said, "So what exactly is that?" And he says, "I've heard of that." And I said, "Well, it just means that what you vibrate with, what you think and what you feel creates a vibration, and that vibration determines what you attract into your life." So, I was explaining it, in a little bit of detail, and he said, "Oh yeah," he said, "I love that." He says, "That's kind of like the revolution going on in the world right now, isn't it?" He said, "Isn't that like where we're all headed?" And I said, "Yeah. Right on." And I was so glad to hear him say that because here's a young guy who didn't really know what it is, but he's picking up on the fact that we're all starting to understand that we create our own reality. Because I think that's one way I explained to him. I said, at the bottom line is we're creating our reality. And so that's, for him to just sort of reflect back that he sees that as a worldwide trend. I thought that was pretty cool.
It is very cool. It's reassuring.
Yeah.
I think it proves the point, too. I mean, it's not just something that you and I are wishfully thinking is going to happen. It's actually really happening. You can find the evidence if you look for it. You just have to be open to seeing it.
Yeah, and I love this way Abraham described it. They said there are people who have learned to talk about what they want, not about what they don't want. There are people who have learned to praise rather than criticize. There are people who have learned to be optimistic rather than pessimistic. There are people who have trained themselves thought by thought to be in the vortex. So, they were talking about how, people that have a lot of wealth or people that have a wonderful relationship with a partner or with their family or with their friends or with their kids, in a way they're definitely accessing what's in their vortex.
Oh, yeah.
And whether or not they consciously know how they did it, some come from families where it was easier because of the way their parents were, or their grandparent. They have more of an ancestral positivity and optimism in their family rather than pessimism. They have more praise than criticism is normal in their family, So it makes it easier. But some of those people are people who have learned to overcome a world of criticism, or they've learned to overcome pessimism. I feel like I'm on a journey to learn to overcome pessimism, and to quit being critical. My coach, who was helping me with channeling, when she was giving me personal coaching, she was saying, you have a thing of being pretty critical about what comes through you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that's why you get harsh about judging whether or not it's good enough. You know, and believe me, it's good enough. You just have to get off the harsh judgment of it.
Right, sure. Yeah, that's one of the things I felt within myself, just from doing these podcasts. I mean, it's like, I don't remember who said it. One of you guys said it to me this week, that I get the benefit of working with 5 life coaches per week for free by doing the podcast, and there's truth to that.
Yeah.
Because the truth is,
I was saying that to you.
Was it you? Okay. Because, you know, when I'm talking to all 5 of you, every single time, obviously we have to spend some time talking about the negative side, because contrast is how we understand stuff. But I also get so much of the positive side. And every time I hear something or even say something myself, it's just yet another reminder to me, to my physical being, oh yeah, look on the positive side of life. Stay positive. Look for the silver lining. Avoid the black clouds. And it actually is having that kind of effect on my life. I mean, that's in a way, it's kind of partially why I was doing the podcast. I mainly was doing it and continue to do it because it just feels good. But as I'm saying that, I'm realizing, well, it feels good because I'm staying on the positive side. So the two go hand in hand, really.
Yeah. And one thing I learned about listening to this channel stuff from Abraham, anyway, when I started getting into it 4 years ago, was there's deep wisdom here. It's not just, you know, some great techniques. It is simple too, but you know, I think the more I listen and read, and that's why I like doing these podcasts, because each week it's a different topic, and it, in a sense, it's doing the same thing you're talking about. It's getting me more conversant or more familiar with this way of thinking and this way of understanding life, and that's a good antidote to how many years I learned the other way of thinking, right? And I feel like it takes an antidote like that of a big dose of the truth, you might say, of how life works to counteract so many years of believing otherwise.
Or at least to give you the feeling of empowerment that you can counteract it. Because even if you're exploring that stuff, you still have to, at some point, we all still have to, at some point, actively get positive about our own lives. I mean, it's great to know the theory, and I love knowing the theory. That's one of the things I love doing in the podcast, is going over all the theory. But at some point, you have to apply it, right? We have to apply it, otherwise we don't get the real big benefit out of it. And when we do apply it, I've been finding more and more and more, the more I apply it, the easier it is to avoid all those little pitfalls that I was falling into before. You know, like you were saying, the self-criticism and the criticism of what's going on in the world, and then the negative perception and the negative stance and so forth. It starts to melt away. And it was a lifetime worth that I built up, and I'm sure you did the same, that, you know, we took a lifetime building up with all this tremendous amounts of negativity, and yet within a relatively short period of time, by comparison, it's melting away. Among other things, that shows, first of all, how reprogrammable we are. It also shows that it doesn't matter what your age is, you can continue to grow and get better and better and better. But mostly, like you were talking about, it gives reassurance that we don't have to wait for another lifetime. We can get it now. We can get what we've been hoping for all our lives right now, and we're in the process of doing that because we keep telling ourselves more and more positive stuff about our own lives.
Yeah, it is really revolutionary. I mean, that's why the chapter I wrote for the book that you're going to publish is about my own story, and that's why I am a law of attraction life coach, because over the last 4+ years, I have changed so dramatically after I went through this thing of, I said before, of losing my home, my wife, half of my life savings, getting very sick, losing the source of income, the career that I'd had for 25 years up until then, and losing the spiritual teacher I had. I lost all of that within a 6-month period. And when I lost all that stuff, I went eventually into what I called my dark night of the soul, because I struggled so hard after that to get back on my feet. And the thing that really cinched the whole deal, that really changed all that struggle and all that darkness and all that fear and worry and anxiety of having had my life so upturned, you know, I call it the taco cart of my life, got so upturned that I dove into vision quests with shaman. I all kinds of psychology and books and so many things that I was struggling to try to find. I mean, I must have done 8 workshops during a 4-year period of just trying to find myself. And a lot of it was fantastic stuff, but I was still struggling up until the day that a psychic told me, you need to go listen to Abraham, and that all happened by a miraculous story of how I ended up in this 20-minute session with this psychic at a psychic fair.
Huh.
And after she did the session on me, she says, you need to do 3 things. You need to get into Abraham, matrix energetics, and go study to be a psychic. And I thought, really?
Wow.
I do.
Yeah,
and so,
probably the last thing you wanted to hear, right?
What's that?
Probably the last thing you wanted to hear at that point, I would imagine.
No, it was exciting because
it was?
that was kind of like exotic. That really, I need to do things like that.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, that's good then. That's good.
Well, because I was looking for anything that could get me to not feel so much angst and worry about my life. What was going to happen to me financially? What was going to happen to me romantically? What was going to happen to me having a home again? What was going to happen to me having a career again? I needed these things. I needed spiritual guidance again. And then when I went and listened to Abraham, literally within the first hour of listening to this video feed, where I was sitting there with 20 people and it was a live program being presented from LA or San Diego or something, I was just knew I was in the realm of answers now. It was like, oh my God, these are my answers. I was listening and every sentence, every paragraph was giving me the answers to everything that I was longing to know in my guts, in my heart, that I was struggling with, that I was suffering through. I was getting the answers. And it was like, oh my God, So it was literally going to the Vortex and sitting down and being served a banquet. That's what it was like. And when you've been on the street, as a beggar, and suddenly you're sitting in a banquet, it's pretty nice. It's pretty rewarding. And that's how I felt. And I've been feeling that way ever since with listening to Abraham, because it's continually telling me the answers I need for all the things that I've had questions about my whole life.
I suspect, too, that your experience with Abraham may have been similar to mine in that, because I found Abraham very much to be the same way, that it was answering a whole lot of questions. And more importantly, it was giving answers that deep down felt absolutely right. For the first time in my life, I was hearing spiritual truths that actually added up in terms of what I was feeling down inside. And that was a real breakthrough.
Yeah, the thing that convinced me so much that Abraham was the real deal was that my mind, and it's to this day, can never listen to what's being said and find reasons to doubt it. It's like it always just says, yep, sounds real, sounds true, sounds right, feels good. And so I keep listening. I keep, working with these principles. So I formed my entire coaching practice on my own personal transformation. Because as I watched and listened, I started to realize all these key insights and understandings and processes that I was learning through Abraham were transforming my life so much that I realized this can change everything that I've ever struggled with. So I didn't need the psychology books anymore. I didn't need to work with shaman anymore. I didn't need to do any of the things I'd been doing. And the ineffectiveness of those things just seemed like the dark ages compared to getting into this channeled information. It was like, this is really coming from source. This is coming from a place of infinite wisdom. And that other stuff is good, but it just wasn't enough for me.
No, I understand. I totally understand, because my own experience feels very similar to that. Just the feeling that you finally found what you were looking for. That's what I was experiencing. I felt like, wow, I've been looking for this information for so long. It's finally here. Thank you so much for bringing it. What took so long? Why did I have to wait so long for this? But it showed up. It was there. And I guess, part of it is because of what Jerry Hicks said at the beginning of each of the recordings that he was a part of while he was still here. He said that this information is being provided for people who are ready to receive it. And when I heard that, I said, wow, I guess I was ready to receive it. Wonder what I did, What did I do to deserve it?
Yeah, exactly. And I had actually first listened to Abraham 5 years before that, or not even 5 years, more like 10 years, or eight years before that. I had listened to a bunch of Abraham, and but it didn't resonate with me the same at all. Really? It was like I could hear that there was wisdom in it, because you are what you think, and you're creating your own reality. I got that, but I didn't really feel resonant with it to the core of my being like I did when I needed it so badly, or when in other words, it took me those extra 8 years to get prepared to really hear what they were saying. So, when this psychic told to me, go listen to Abraham, part of me said, oh, okay, really? It was like, I'll go back and listen to that again. But this time it was like night and day. I mean, I was listening to Esther Hicks, and after having spent all this time working with shaman in South America and North America, I said, oh my God, she's a shaman. It's like, at first I literally saw her. She's a shaman. She's literally doing, what's the word? Magical psychic work. She's conjuring another realm as she speaks. And then I realized, well, that is exactly what channeling is. Whatever channeling is, it's conjuring this other realm. It's letting this other realm, the unseen realm, speak through her. And it was like magic to me.
So was that the difference? I mean, is that why it seems so different from the first time you'd listened to this stuff? Because I have to admit, for me, the first time I listened to Abraham, I was clicking with it right away, and I just couldn't get enough of it. But for you, it was a different experience. So I'm wondering, what was the shift? What did you notice made the difference?
Well, one thing that was really different was that when I first listened in 2006 and 2005, 2006, I had another teacher. I had a spiritual teacher who I completely relied on and listened to a lot, and so I couldn't substitute what Abraham was saying for what my teacher was saying. I had more belief in what he was saying than what Abraham was saying. So I listened to Abraham with sort of a there's a story of the ant who wants to know what sugar tastes like, because his other ant friend is always telling him, like, sugar is really fabulous, man. I have a whole mound of sugar at my ant hill. You should come and try it. And this other ant lived on the salt hill. And so he said, well, it sounds good, but I have a wonderful hill where I live on where I have salt. And so he says, well, you come sometime and see what sugar tastes like. And so one day the salt ant decides to go over and see the sugar ant. So just to be sure that he, stays stable, he puts a little chunk of salt in the back of his mouth. So it's just there dissolving. And he goes over and the sugar ant says, yeah, try a piece of this. You're going to love it. So he puts a piece in his mouth and he sucks on it and he says, well, it's okay, but it tastes quite a bit like salt to me. And he says, I don't really see that it's that great of a thing. And, the moral of the story is, spit out the salt. I think the ant says, spit out the salt and try it.
Right.
And then, there's a conversion. And I think when I first heard Abraham, I had a piece of salt of my other teacher in my mouth. So I couldn't really hear the power of the impact in my life. And I wasn't ready to change. I just wasn't ready at that time.
Yeah.
I needed another 10 years, or not 10 years, but 8 years, 6, 7 years of transformation before I'd be ready to hear their message.
It reminds me of one of the reader reviews that I saw on Amazon for one of the Abraham Hicks books, and I don't remember which one it was. I think it may have been Asking It Is Given. But this reader gave a negative review, a 1-star review, and the reason for his review was, he says, I'm going to save you the cost of the book. What you think comes into your life. There, I've saved you the cost of the book. And on the surface, he's correct. If you just look at the surface, that much is true. But it also misses a whole lot of stuff, because the one thing that I've noticed about Abraham Hicks more than anything else is every time you read the same passage, you get something new. And probably the most dramatic example of that I can think of is I've been talking with each of you guys, my co-hosts on the show, And I found that even though all of you had read, I think most of you anyway, I'm not sure if all of you had read The Law of Attraction, that book by Abraham Hicks, none of you remembered that there was a section that described not one but 3 laws: law of attraction, the science of deliberate creation, and the law, or otherwise known as the law of creation, and the law of allowing. And none of you remembered that was there, and yet that was like a key portion of that book. Well, of course, we're missing stuff. Even when we think we've got it, we're missing stuff. We just, sometimes we skim read, sometimes, we see one thing and there's this other good thing over there, but we skip that because we saw the one good thing over here, so that's all we're focused on. You have to go through stuff repeatedly in order to get it all. So on the one hand, that guy was right. On the other hand, he had no idea what he had overlooked. He had overlooked a whole bunch of stuff. And that's really, in my view, what the concept of the vortex tells us. The concept of the vortex tells us there's all this stuff that you've already asked for that you are not aware is just waiting for you right there. You just got to keep going at this thing and getting yourself into that positive place so you can find it, because it's just sitting there.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? When they were describing about the vortex, and one of the things I was checking out, they used the example of wanting money or wanting a lover in your life, which are two of the big things that a lot of people, struggle with.
Right.
And I like the way they described it. Like here's the way they describe about the lovers is when you ask for a lover of a certain stature, a lover with a certain look, a lover with a certain attitude, a lover with a certain financial condition, a lover with a certain amount of love, when you ask for a lover, that lover is there, that lover is summoned, and every component you ask for has been summoned to this vortex, and it's there. All cooperative components have now been summoned. He says the question we want to ask you is, to help you answer, is, are you a cooperative component to all that's been summoned? And so are you cooperating enough that you're being drawn into your own vortex where all of your lovers are, where your money is, where your answers are, where your clarity is, where your vitality is, where all that you have become vibrationally is? Or are you an ornery holdout beating the drum of, I've been asking for this thing for so long, and it never comes to me. I'm getting tired of looking. All the good lovers are taken. It's not fair. Mm-hmm. My friend has a lover.
Yep.
But I don't have a lover. I don't have a lover. I don't have a lover. It's the same thing we were talking about on that podcast about lack. It all comes down to one thing. I don't have what I want. I don't have what I want. I don't have what I want. And as long as we have thoughts running around in us of lack, that we don't yet have it, then we can't get into the vortex.
Right.
Exactly. Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing.
It's simply that we have different trains of thought that we run on ourselves that deny that it could be that easy that we could have it.
I love a quote that Mike Dooley uses that he gives us, because Mike doesn't really talk specifically about the vortex. That's more of an Abraham term, but he talks about the same concept. And one of his little notes from the universe kind of sums it up nicely. It's like you've come up to a door and you're pounding on the door, you're shouting out, open, 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 and you're looking for keys and you can't find keys, and you're pounding saying, let me in, let me in, let me in. And on the other side of the door are all your friends in the non-physical who are just, they're practically tearing their hearts out for you because you made them promise before you came here that you wouldn't, that they wouldn't tell you that the door was already unlocked and all you had to do was open it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the teacher that I had for 40 years, he used to always say, it's like you're behind these bars in a jail, and you're holding onto the bars, and you're shaking the door, and it won't open because it's locked, and so you're freaked out that you can't have the life you want. It's so frustrating for you, right? And he said, but what you don't realize is that if you would walk to either side, to the right or to the left, about 5 feet, you could walk around the bars and you'd be right out. It's just because you're so focused on the bars and the locked door that you believe it so strongly that you don't, if you would let go. And there's a story in India. If you want to catch a monkey, you put out a jar with some, banana in it or peanuts or whatever, and the monkey, and you make the opening in the jar just big enough that when the monkey puts his hand in there and grabs the banana or grabs a handful of peanuts, tries to pull his hand out, he can't get it out unless he lets go of the banana or the peanuts. And you can literally catch a monkey, and he'll scream and everything because you're coming and grabbing him because he won't let go of what's in his hand. And it's the same thing of standing at those bars, or holding on to that thing that's in the jar. They don't realize that if we would just let go of the thing we're clinging so tightly to, we could have what we want. That it's just our resistance that makes it impossible for us to have what we want.
My wife is a Muppets fan, and we have a copy of A Muppet Christmas Carol, which, of course, is the Dickens tale told by Muppets. And in that movie, it has a number of scenes that she really loves. But there's one scene that reminded me of what you were talking about with your metaphor of the guy behind the bars. Because there are two main characters, Gonzo the Great and Rizzo the Rat. They're like the narrators of the story. And the two of them are trying to get into the house of Ebenezer Scrooge so they can see what's going on in that part of the tale. And so they have this big gate that they have to get through, and they're climbing over the gate, and there's all this drama about, Rizzo's so afraid of climbing over the gate because he hates heights, and then he gets up on top and says, "Oh, God bless me," and he falls to the ground, and Gonzo misses him. He hits the ground, splat. And then he gets. They finally have gotten to the other side of the gate, and Rizzo says, "Oh wait, I forgot something." And he runs through the bars to go get the thing that he forgot. And then he goes back, and he jumps through the bars again. And Gonzo says, "You can fit through those bars?" And Rizzo says, "Yeah." And Gonzo says, "You're such an idiot." And Rizzo says, "What? What?"
What? Yeah. Yeah, I think someday I think we are waking up as humanity, and we're someday going to look at all these movies we made in Hollywood about this intense struggle of the empire against the evil empire and all the heroes and the do-gooders, and we're going to realize that was an old theme we used to play out all the time as human beings. It's like we always used to think everything was such a huge struggle. We had so much drama,
Oh, yeah.
Of course, we'll probably go, yeah, it was kind of fun, though. Well, maybe we like it. Obviously we must like it. I couldn't believe when Abraham said one time, it says, you know that the wars may never end because you guys like them so much. You guys, there's so many people that like war, and you think of all these, I don't know. I probably shouldn't talk about this because people will get really angry, but it's like, is that true? That so people like war, and that's why we still have it,
But probably the main reason you shouldn't talk about it is because you don't like war, and all you're going to do is just attract some more war to yourself. So we should probably get off that topic pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But the thing is here with this whole vortex thing, what we're realizing as we continue to study Abraham is that the vortex is, on the one hand, quite possibly the most simple concept we could have. And on the other hand, you can spend a lifetime learning how to interact with it. Because really, ultimately, we're trying to get into the vortex, right? And getting into the vortex, that's where you've got yourself into a positive, good-feeling place. You're in alignment with your own inner being. You're both your inner being and your physical being are in agreement. Everything's good. Everything's looking good. You're enjoying stuff. You're in a state of joy, all that kind of thing. And then you're in the vortex. That's what we're trying to learn how to do. It sounds so simple. So simple, and it is simple. At its core, it is simple, which really points to one very fact. Like Rizzo the Rat, we just make something complicated that doesn't need to be complicated. It really doesn't. It's very simple stuff. And, we've got a long history, each one of us, of having been taught by, our parents and our teachers and friends and so forth. This is the way things are. Life's a struggle and so forth. Yeah, we've got all that, but bottom line is we're the ones who adopted it. It's not like they forced us to, okay, we're going to change your mind for you. No, it doesn't work that way. We are the ones who said, yeah, okay, I'll buy into that. I volunteer. Yep. And that means we can just as easily not volunteer. We can unvolunteer. We don't have to be volunteering to be victims anymore. We can actually volunteer to choose the happy side of life. That's cool.
Well, that Abraham says a lot, it's like, yeah, the price you have to pay to have the life you want is you have to choose to be happy. That's the price you have to pay. And yet sometimes for a lot of us, I know I can speak for myself, it seems like I'm paying a price to have to surrender to the fact of being in a happier place.
Yep.
It's like, how can I create a life that I do more of the things I love, I smile more, I laugh more, I do more fun things, and that's okay. That's okay, Tommy. You can go do more of the things you love and have more time of your life when you're not worried about anything. And it's
in fact,
like,
it's not just okay, it's actually good for you. Like, hooray.
Well, yeah, it's not
like,
only good
whoa.
for me. That's how I get everything I want.
Yeah, it's like throw up the hands and celebrate. Yahoo! This is it. This is good.
Yeah.
The amazing part that in the messages, the negative messages we got, this is something that positive psychology has taught us. The messages we got taught it to us backwards. They taught us that we had to struggle and we had to work hard to be successful so that we could be happy. And positive psychology has proven definitively that that is exactly wrong. It is exactly the opposite, that you have to be happy before you can be successful. And they even have statistics to show that through their studies they found that those people who tried to become happy by being successful first got to their final goal about 10% of the time, whereas those who followed the reverse path of being happy first ended up being successful 90% of the time. That's like a major, major breakthrough. It's one that I'm glad came from the world of positive psychology because it's more scientific, so people can buy into it more easily if they have trouble with the spiritual side or the channeling side or whatever of LOA. Well, positive psychology has demonstrated that what the LOA folks are telling us is true. The fact is you have to be happy first, and then all the good stuff happens, not the reverse.
Yeah, it's amazing. I tried to do a company for 4 years as a real estate investor, and it was all about I'm going to get the money, and then I'm going to do all the things I want to do. I'll take the whole family to Europe. I can pay for my kids' college education.
Oh, yes.
And it didn't work at all. And nope. I knew that the reason it didn't work is because I was not having fun. I was not happy doing that work. It was not my cup of tea. And, of course, the stock market also crashed during the middle of it all. But it was definitely not for me, and that's why I ended up a life coach, because it took me years to arrive at a place where I'm doing something I completely love that feels like it's my natural thing. This is great.
Well, I'm glad you did too, because unfortunately we can't keep going with it because we're down to our last minute. I got to get the commercial message in. So if you've been enjoying this podcast, please do take the time to subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. The quick version is you can subscribe at loatoday.net. You can also find us in the iTunes store or on an Android phone. You can find us by installing a podcast app and then doing a search for LOA Today. You can get the podcast app out of the Play Store. And Tom, if someone's looking for a little personal coaching assistance, how do they reach you? Because sometimes you just need to talk to somebody directly.
Yeah, they can contact me at my website, which is youarejoy.com. That's the three words, youarejoy.com. And there's a page on there they can sign up for a free coaching session, a free hour with me. And from there, you could decide if you want to do more coaching or not. No pressure whatsoever. Bring your concerns, and we can have a coaching session.
Sounds great. Tom, let's do it again Monday morning because our shows together are always great.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, sounds good. And don't forget, you can tune in this afternoon for the afternoon podcast with Wendy Dillard. But in the meantime, we will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.